Ken, yeah, this brings to mind one more thing, Ken. When we have a meeting and people are absent and we do handouts such as this, Denise needs to email to the people that weren't here.
Why did?
I get them anyway.
I didn't get one.
Yeah, you get one.
I didn't
Did you
either.
get one of those?
I don't have one.
Oh, neat.
Where did I get? Oh, it was hand delivered last meeting?
Like these.
Oh,
Paper
okay. Well, that stinks for you guys.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Your floor.
I guess it's a question of where do you want to start? Because at the beginning, I guess.
Well, I,
Bob, you went
I
through
went
this.
through it
You
and-
went through this and you
I'm saying great.
made some observations earlier in this meeting. Why don't you
Yeah,
just
I've got to
discuss-
I got to locate that now.
And that might be the easiest thing to do is if you've got any questions starting from the top, we can just hit them as you go down. If you don't have any concerns about what I've put in there, we can just keep moving.
Now, there was one thing that struck me, and I have to relocate it. It had to do with when we were going to do a site plan review and when we were not.
So that's probably more in 13300 series, which I also have for you tonight.
Here.
Do you have extra copies?
Uh-huh.
Right.
You
I
need
think
one?
Dan and I need one. Thank you.
So the first part of this 1300 is, of course, just more administrative, saying that yes, we have a zoning ordinance and this is how it is generally set up. There are a few things I noticed in the top part relative to the interpretation of the codes and also the zoning map. And so I've recommended some language in there about the interpretation aspect of it, that just so it's clear in the future that this code, the way it's written, is to be interpreted as strictly as possible. And anyways, that's basically what that is saying. These are the minimum requirements. The zoning ordinance itself, some of this, as we go through, as I've been going through it, some of this is just reorganizing it so that there's better flow in the overall document. For instance, this 13201, it didn't need to be its own section in the code, and so it's been raised up to the previous section, but there was no text change to it. Under the zoning map areas, this is where I started looking at things a little more closely, wanting to make sure that we were changing our process a little bit. So the zoning map itself, the way it's currently written is that we have to have this static map somewhere in the offices, and we are supposed to actually write on the map whenever there's a change. But we have the technology now that we can do this all electronically and have it updated in the system. We don't have to be handwriting on any maps anywhere. And so part of this change is reflecting that capability that we have now of doing it electronically.
Great.
But at the same time, recognizing that there could be multiple iterations of the map floating out there. And so the official map still will be a static map that we have in the offices, and we'll make sure that that's updated appropriately. Okay. As far as the changes on the official map, again, some of this is just cleaning up the language and processes that we have. Initiating amendments. Wanted to make it clear that the city council, the planning board, community development director, or citizens property owners, whoever, they can all initiate changes to the zoning map. You don't have to be a very special person to be able to request a change. So anybody can do that. As far as the process is concerned, we're calling out that the city charter outlines the process, the state code has a process, and we're utilizing both of those, not just the state codes. And some of this, again, is procedurally striking. No amendment to this section which involves a matter portrayed on the official zoning map shall become effective until signed by the chair of the city council and attested by the city clerk. We already have in our processes that there's ordinances that get adopted, and we handle those ordinances certain ways. We don't need to reiterate that information in here. Unauthorized changes. Again, we're already very clear that it can't be changed except through a certain process, and we have a little bit of redundancy there. The last paragraph I've added there under corrections is that the development director may make the corrections if it's identified that something was not put in there properly or according to the way it was adopted, and that we don't have to go back through our lengthy process of public hearings and meetings just to make a correction. If the documentation is there, that we can just make the corrections. Okay.
That's good.
As far as interpreting the zoning map, again, some of it is language that is already elsewhere in the code, or we have, again, redundancies. In the case of dealing with protection districts, hydrologic plans, instead of referring to the latest edition of the Maine Geologic Survey, we'll just note that those are going to be constantly changing, or they may be out of date, and so it'd be better for us to refer to an officially prepared engineering study with regards to the delineation of special overlay district boundaries, such as the flood hazard areas or the wetland areas. The last addition there, paragraph I, it was elsewhere in the code. And so, again, just try to make sure that all the interpretation elements are in one spot rather than spread throughout the document. That's what I is showing there. The establishment of the districts, the mixed-use district, this was some proposed language that I've got in there, really just clarifying it, but and also making a distinction in the industrial district. So looking at some of the language that was in the old I-2 zone versus the I-1 zone, and trying to, where we're combining those together, just trying to create some consistency.
Yep.
We did not have a general statement for the airport district, even though it's a proposed zone, and so added the airport district there. With the special protection overlay districts, as far as the organization of the whole zoning district, the whole document is concerned, so far what we've been doing in the district is we're saying we have a map and we have certain zones, and then you outline what all the requirements are in those zones. Well, in this case, with paragraph, or the special protection overlay districts, we kind of jumped the gun in that we've said these are our special zones, And we're gonna throw all of this into the regulatory aspect when we're just trying to identify what the zones are right here. So simplification is to take all the regulatory aspects, we'll pull them out in a separate section, so it's very clear. If you wanna see what the regulations are, this is the section to go to. This is just simply identifying the different zones that we have. Okay. And these, again, the language that we have here for the sand and gravel overlay district, wellhead protection district, and the flood hazard mitigation district, these captions are already in the document. We're just highlighting them as these are our zones, and we'll have all the details, regulation details later on in the document.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of strikeouts. in
It's just
those.
gonna really get
So
moved.
they move
Right.
under
Yeah.
new overlay district section.
Right.
Right. Yep.
So that takes,
It takes us past 15, 17.
18.
I had a question on 19.
Was there something on the bottom of 18 Creek? Oh,
So on the bottom of 17, this again is this rules governing district boundaries. That's an interpretation element, which is now being incorporated higher into the document. And so it's shown as a strikeout here, but
Yeah,
it's really just a.
it shows up earlier.
Right. Okay. All right, district regulations, permitted land use requirements. On 18,
Okay, yeah, that's. Getting down to table 13203, I have no questions about all the different strikeouts between CEO and yes and planning board. That, we've massaged that for 2 years.
right,
But, at the heading, it says PB, and you're suggesting use requires planning board. It doesn't say what the planning board is gonna do.
for impact considerations, right? So this is a land use table, right? We're just saying that these are all the land uses we anticipate. And we're saying it's either not permitted, or administratively, the CEO can look at it. If it has PB on this, that means that the planning board's gonna have to look at the land use itself.
I understand that, but it does not say what the planning board is gonna do. Are we just gonna look at it? We're gonna have to have a hearing? We're gonna do a site plan review on every place it says planning board? That's why I'm looking for the specifics.
So this would not be a site plan review designation here. This would be a land use itself. You're gonna look at the land use, and you'll have a public hearing on it. Public will be invited to come in, discuss the land use and potential impacts. And this would be a new section of the code that you're gonna be looking at, and it's gonna be tied highly to the general plan and the goals that are in the general plan, as well as the distinctions of the zones themselves, what the characteristics of the zones are that you're trying to accomplish. And then as a planning board, if a land use is coming to you for review, you're gonna be looking at all the potential impacts and looking at it. And so we'll have to create that criteria.
Okay, that's my point.
Right.
It doesn't
Impact
say.
considerations. It says.
All it says is that the term PB means planning board. But it doesn't, nowhere does it say, what are we gonna do?
It says for impact considerations, which to me could, and in most cases would require a site review.
Well,
That's what I.
we ran
that's my
around this earlier
understanding.
tonight with the
So-
land use change.
So let me quickly jump down into this document. This is something I've been working on that you don't have yet.
If it's an allowed use, then the code enforcement officer should be able to approve it without
that's just
planning
one
board
gate.
review.
That's just one gate though.
Right.
Is the use appropriate to the table? Yes or no? And then you have to look much further, deeper into the site plan review to establish whether they're doing it in a way that's, the impact is going to be favorable.
And that's what we do.
So let me
Two-step process.
jump quickly to our current processes element of things. So what you're seeing unfold before you is the current regulatory process that we have. That if it goes through the code enforcement office, that somebody can go through a concept review, they can go through a final review and get kicked back to them. If it has to go to the planning board, oh, sorry, we're still working there. So if the planning board, it can go through a very similar thing. They can look at it, have public hearings, get comments, review the application for completeness. The other public meetings, different tracks that can happen. This is the process that the code currently outlines. The code is not, it's unclear about the review of uses themselves. It just simply says that PB means site plan review process.
But
Okay.
that's not what you put in here.
This would make it so that the planning board can look at the specific use of the property, and then we'll also have a site plan review process in addition to that.
Also.
Like you say, it's a gate system.
I'm totally confused. I'm sorry, I am. Because you keep using the word can, and I hear board members meaning the word shall.
So this is be the proposed process, and I gotta, obviously
So
I've
you're
got things.
basically, see, I've been on the planning board before, and my understanding is that when we have the planning board come in this land use table, that we do a site design review if certain changes are occurring, and there are certain other things that don't need the site design. Are we changing that to a site plan review process that doesn't always, the planning board doesn't always have to do the site?
Right, the planning board does not always have to do the site.
We're gonna have less instances where the site design review has to be done.
Right.
Okay.
So the applicant comes to the CEO and they say, this is what we want to do. The CEO then says, well, according to the code then, first, does the land use itself need to be reviewed by the planning board? If it does, then the planning board has a public hearing, you discuss the impacts, and you're able to look at the general plan, the city codes, the proposed impacts or the anticipated impacts, and say, that's a yes or no on that use being in that zone. Where we have such a lengthy land use table, there's not going to be many instances where this may get kicked out. Okay? But this is where the planning board is able to say, based on the land use and the impacts that we anticipate, these are conditions that need to be looked at through the review process that may be in addition to those that are in the code. At that point, it gets put down to the staff review where we look at, these are all the codes that we've adopted, and the codes get adopted through the process, public hearings, and vetting goes out, the planning board, we look at it, the city council looks at it. Ultimately, the codes are the codes. Okay? If they're written right, there's no deviation. It's simply, these are the standards that we have. And you meet those or you don't meet those. So if we have a hard and fast standard, then the staff is able to look at it through a review process, and both from the zoning side, the building code side, fire side, wetland side, the state side, utilities, they're going to have theirs. It comes through that process. If the planning board had to look at it from a use standpoint, then the planning board would be the one that gets the final approval authority on it. And so you would say, these are all the conditions, all the uses that we said, you make sure you have an extra fine-tooth comb on that. When it comes back to the planning board, you can say, okay, looks like we haven't addressed everything appropriately or not, or maybe we need additional studies, which could create a loop if you feel things haven't been addressed right. Ultimately, the planning board would say it's ready for approval or conditional approval, and then the CEO processes it at the end.
Is there going to be a site plan review document from which we work to get that done?
Yes.
Where is that in the process that you show?
The site plan review document?
Yes.
That's right, it's right there.
Well, that's staff, that's not planning board.
When does planning board get involved?
If you were looking at the land use, it's going to come back to you for a final site plan review.
Well, I need that flow chart to document the fact that we will be doing a formal site plan review and public hearing. It can't be hidden.
But it
The
currently
public
isn't.
hearing is here. The public hearing is, I mean,
Public hearing is
what is the point of a public hearing first?
I've asked that question many times.
yeah.
Because it's fruitless. It's just an opportunity for people to vent. Because if the applicant is within the land use and the ordinances, you can have 1,000 people opposed, we have to grant it.
Right.
And so the public hearing is fruitless, other than giving people an opportunity to vent.
And that's why if there's a land use question, the opportunity to vent and raise concerns about the land use really is the very beginning of the process. That's why this public hearing will be here in front of the planning board. After the public hearing, and they've had their chance to vent, like you say, it really comes down to what are the standards, do they meet the standards? Have we addressed all the concerns through those standards appropriately? And in the end, it's going to come back to you in a public meeting, not a public hearing, but in a public meeting, say,
All right, site plan review will now be a public meeting and not a public hearing.
right.
All right, that's good.
Well-
The only thing I'm hung up on is, we started this whole process with the idea of making the process simpler
Right.
for business people.
Yep.
And it looks to me like we've just made it worse.
No,
I don't think so.
if it's in a land use that the CEO can review it, then it goes right into this final hearing. That gets reviewed by staff, staff's going to review it against the standards, and it doesn't come to the planning board, they'll kick it back out to the CEO to wrap it up with any bonds or guarantees and other things.
Give me an example then of why something would ever come to the planning board on the question of land use. Why does it say abattoir R3 PB? What the heck are we gonna be determining?
And let me add to his question based on this one-page application, which says nothing.
Yeah,
And so,
that's what,
Well, they didn't,
I have a
it
hard
says
time
nothing
with.
because they weren't told they have to do a site plan.
right.
Now they
That's
have-
what I'm saying. But this is a use permit application,
I
not
know.
a site plan.
so the applications themselves will need to be updated. I can show you what we've done with that. Because you're right, we need to get more information up front from the applicants as to what's being proposed.
Yeah.
So we saw one tonight when we were talking about solar arrays. Well, it says public utility, but it didn't say anything about solar arrays. So is that a land use question that would have to go to the planning board?
It doesn't even say here utility. It says nothing.
We're kind of interpreting it, I guess.
So what we would
Technical
have,
specs about what they're going to be generating.
Right.
What is that?
right, so for instance, what we'd have is a concept, this would be the site, this would be a development application that's been drafted. You'd be looking at one application that says, tell us what you're looking at. Is it a preliminary subdivision, condominium, new non-residential development? Are you just modifying your non-residential development, multifamily, grading, excavating, basic developer information, developer engineer design information. And then with each application, they would need to submit plans that show this is what we're proposing to do. This is the layout that we're going to have. If it's a subdivision, the plat sheet it's going to have, the site improvements that are being proposed. This stuff they get handed this when they meet with the CEO at that very first meeting. This is what we'd like to do. And actually, everything you're looking at here is currently in the ordinance.
Just in different part.
It's just different places.
Yeah, scattered.
Right. And so this would be a one-page, well, it's,
Condensing it, yeah.
It's a lot more than
Yeah.
one page.
So who
this-
makes a judgment of what's required? I mean, that will be done at the CEO level?
well, that's where the applications, we just say these are what the
This is
applications
kind
are.
of where we're finding out what the land
Built it.
use is going to be by what they tell us
Right.
and how it will fit into that
Some land.
table.
Okay. Well, I'll have to look at it.
And so,
I'll have to look
as
at
far as when it comes to the planning board or not, that's the policy matter that you make the recommendations on that. There are some land uses that you just think, you know what, we can regulate it, but there's also just that opportunity the public needs to have to voice their concerns. That's when you put a PB in the land use table. So everywhere there's a PB, it's going to be coming back to you for that initial public hearing, opportunity for the public to vent.
All right, but then, let's say we do that, we have the public hearing, and people do the venting, and then we say, but it's a go. Now, does that automatically mean that it has to be a site plan review? This is what I'm getting still confused
Yeah,
between
me too.
land use hearings and site plan reviews. I mean, the guy's gonna come in and build a building on a piece of land that he has.
Right.
Why do we have to get involved? Even though we've got a
Right.
hearing on it, because we've got a land use hearing.
Right, these change of use.
If he's not changing the use,
Right, well, even
we
if he
should
is.
see that.
If it's a permitted use, if it's a permitted use in the zone, I guess the issue of why do you have a public hearing? Why do you have planning board review? If you've already outlined all the details, all the standards they have to meet, why not just let that go through a site plan review process at the staff level? And that's what this is trying to establish.
I think, you
Well,
know,
that's, okay.
you hit on a key word a while ago, and that is policy. That the planning board's purpose is to establish policy. As far as the mechanics of the application, dotting the Ts, dotting the Is, crossing the Ts, etc., that's staff. And you know, and I like what you're saying, because then you reserve the more important policy establishment by this board. We're not necessarily the ones that are saying, okay, is this going to impact this? Is this going to impact that? Staff can make that determination just as well as us.
So again, this is another section that you don't have yet. This, I apologize, this is a huge document. You know that. You've been working
Yeah.
on it for how many years now? So, one of the things I'm trying to make a distinction between is that there's the land use review process and there's the site plan review process. They're two different things. Okay? But there may be a time when the planning board needs to get involved with the site plan review process. And so that's another section here that where we call out there
Well,
are
can I interrupt you right there, because I'm not following that, because as I pointed out before, if a use permit comes in looking like this with no detail, we can't make any judgments on it. So when would we ever have a use permit application where we didn't have a site plan or some other information to back this up?
Right. So if a use is coming to you, then it's going to be coming to you as in a concept format, and they're going to provide some kind of site plan for you to weigh in on.
Kind of an initial
Right.
generalized one.
A concept plan is going to come to you.
Okay, I'm good with
a
that.
land use.
Yeah, just so we have something to make a decision on.
So then you're saying that we may have land use hearings, which we may then kick back to staff and say, you handle it. And we won't see it again.
Well, we approved it. We approved the use,
If the
and then it was,
if you had to approve the initial use with the concept plan in front of you, then under these regulations, the way I've drafted them, it would come back to you for the final yes.
but after going through staff.
When it
That
comes
was-
back to us for the final yes, does that mean automatically that there is a site plan review?
You would be part of the site plan review process, yes.
Would the site plan review have already been done by staff?
Right.
We would have done the site plan review and made a final recommendation to you as the
So
final.
we don't have to go through these checklists, applies, doesn't apply, meets, doesn't
Correct.
meet.
Right.
Correct.
Good.
But it's good to still go over it, because we catch things, or sometimes we'll say conditionally pending this, that
Well, but
maybe just went through a crack, or we.
staff
didn't
will
allow
have,
it.
staff will have completed that, and we get to review it
Well,
before
yeah.
the final okay.
To make sure that
Right.
everything was done, I think it's another
That's
filter.
a good proposal. I like that a lot. We get, that way we have the benefit of, other capable eyes on this, and we're getting recommendations.
And
So-
that's what.
And then there's a last chance
Yeah.
to catch things here with the board that might have been missed or hadn't thought of. So I think that's a good proposal.
If the end result is going to be a streamlining of the process, then I can be for it.
Yeah. If it can help expedite it a little
I
bit.
comprehend it. I think it's putting back on the staff a lot of the legwork that we are asked to pass judgment on that we haven't had.
Necessarily
Not
have
be
the
qualified,
expertise.
right?
Exactly.
Yep.
So, again, if it's, and this is where the land use table comes in, if you have a PB in there, then it's gonna have to come to you for that initial public hearing, talk to the public, you'll have a concept in front of you of what they're proposing, a rough layout for what they're talking about. And once the planning board says, yeah, we're okay with that land use, but make sure you double check the screening and the buffering requirement and the grading plan. Pay special attention to that staff. It would kick back down to the staff. We'd go through our regular process of reviewing against all the codes that we have. And at the end of the day, we say, okay, we think we can get this now back to the planning board. Looks like it's okay
Yep.
for final approval.
Yep.
And you may say, you know what, we think we haven't put enough buffering into there. And it's, we have to be a little bit careful at that point. We can't get too arbitrary in that process as far as second guessing the staff, especially if the standard's in place and it's already hard. That's something I'm trying to be very careful of in this review is we don't have something that says, I just found one today, planning board may, in their opinion, if in their opinion they think this is going to cost too much, they can waive that requirement.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I found a couple of those in there that we
getting rid of those, right?
we have to get rid of those. We have to get rid of those.
I really like this because, you know, sometimes you're approving a plan and you're going, "Oh, well, I want to make sure that this was done and this was done, but in this it kind of removes that off of us, and the ultimate responsibility is, you know, making sure everything's up to par through the staff, the city, and saying, okay, this is, you know, good with all the legal and the city standpoints. I think it's good, and we review it. You know, sometimes you think, well, is the fire code okay, or the safety code, or so that's what this is doing for us, and I feel good about it. I feel more confident about approving something, knowing that the staff has looked over it, and not just the planning board saying, okay.
We have generated a position of, without hiring anybody, a city planner.
And I think the public hearing is still good, and as long as, I understand the part, and I felt frustrated before when people voice their opinion, and kind of sometimes feels like it falls on deaf ears, but if they can voice their opinion there, if somebody is upset by the solar array, but they get educated when they come, I think that's a part of the problem. They might hear something's coming up, and then they can say, okay, well, it won't be as bad, or they're doing these precautions, or can you move it over a little bit so it's not this close, or, you know, so sometimes that can help.
It's all
as
about
well.
it's all about the opportunity to engage.
Correct.
And if you have a public hearing, it's not all bad. Yes, you're going to get a lot of negative stuff, but you also have the opportunity to engage with those people and negotiate with whoever wants to
Exactly.
build something. They're listening to the same thing too, and say, hey, you know, how about building a fence here? You know, can you do a 3.5 foot fence or whatever? And so it's just engagement, and it makes everybody happier.
That's right.
One question, if we're going to have a public hearing at the beginning of the process, do we really need a public hearing at the end of the process? After it's
public
been through
meeting.
staff?
It's not a
That's
hearing.
public
It's not a
meeting.
hearing.
It's not a hearing, it's a meeting.
They can come watch what we do.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have to open it up.
But they're allowed to sit and listen?
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
That would be kind of like the signing of the plan.
Well,
and
why-
everything
why
at that
wouldn't you
time.
See
Is
us
that
do
required by
final
law?
review.
Because there's no
Yes.
purpose
All
in
right.
doing it.
Anytime you meet, it's a public meeting.
Okay,
So this is just saying,
Formality.
it's a formality of showing a public meeting on the flow chart.
I got
That's
it.
why we can't conduct business via email.
Yeah.
Other than-
Exactly.
Other than
Any of our
quorum calls.
notes are public,
Other than
public
what?
record.
Quorum calls.
Oh, yeah. Who's there?
Who's got
This
So-
is very nice.
So if it doesn't have to
Yeah.
come to you for a land use review, it may just go straight to the staff, we'll process it through. And again, this would be something you, from a policy matter, you said, these things we're not worried about in those zones, just let them happen. Or review them, but if they meet all the review criteria, let them happen.
I'm feeling better.
Yep.
So,
Very
I like
nice.
I'm feeling better.
so, you know, that,
I'm like pretty.
let me jump, if I can, to I think the more meaty part of this whole discussion, which is the zones and the number of parcels that we have in the proposed zones. I can show you that.
I saw that somewhere.
So, what section are we in here? This is bottom of page, is it 24? Where we talk about the minimum standards in the zones. So, as I was getting into the GIS of these things and looking at the parcels and these minimum standards that have been set, for instance, the R1 zone, well, let's just look at the mixed use zone. So in the mixed use zone, the proposal was to have 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. And I've got my notes over there, but I'm having a hard time reading. Maybe I better just start at the top and get my brain in the right spot. So in the R1 zone, you have a minimum standard of 9,000 square feet.
This what I don't understand.
You don't understand what?
Why is the lot size requirement bigger in R1 than in R2? R1's supposed to be the densest downtown, sort of.
No, actually R2 is more dense than the R1.
Well, yeah, I can do the math. I can see that, but it surprises me.
The zoning, the map that the planning board reviewed, the R2 is more of the multifamily high-density area, and the R1 is more of the quarter-acre lot, single-family type of development. So the R2, which we're looking at there, is the darker yellow, that almost brownish color.
Yeah.
So that's the R2, and the R1 is that.
More of the historical neighborhoods, the R1.
Well, the R1's more of the larger subdivision lot areas.
Okay. And I have been misunderstanding it all along.
So the R3 is the real pale yellow out on the edges or the fringe. The R2 is the high density areas, and the R1 is the quarter acre lot kind of areas. Mixed use.
So
is the-
R2 is, okay, that's just funny numbers.
To me, I think we have high density in both R1 and R2. But I
Yes.
think concerning future development, that you're kind of influencing what development you want coming forward, I think, with these R1 and R2, to me.
In some ways, the proposed zoning is simply the way it's drawn up right now. It's not necessarily a means of promoting certain development. It's just more trying to say this is the development that we've allowed to occur in these areas.
Right.
But
Okay, yeah.
I mean, theoretically, yes, you want to create zones or put zones in place where you want to try to spur on certain types of development or allow things to happen. And I guess my comments here are that under the minimum standards in the R1 zone, where the recommendation was to have a 9,000 square foot minimum lot size, then what we've actually done here is we've created almost 26% of the lots as the legal non-conforming lots.
As what?
Non-conform, legal non-conforming.
Oh,
284 of the almost 1,100 lots in the proposed R1 zone have less than 9,000 square feet.
so that
So
was,
what's the impact of that?
that change was made by this
grandfathered.
board.
You're right.
You're grandfathering everybody, are you grandfathering future sales?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So what's,
So
what's the
it's-
relevance?
The relevance would be if you're, in looking at the land uses or the zoning itself, is, again, it's the ability to say, this is the type of development that we've allowed here, and that we're saying is consistent with this area. If you're saying that in this R1 zone, 26% of the R1 zone is smaller than that, then you may not be utilizing the zoning appropriately to document the type of development that's consistent with that area.
You put
Making
this-
everything
this
that's in
is
there
where
non-conforming.
zoning and-
9,000 isn't a good number then.
Zoning and land use are inextricable.
So it's,
They're
maybe the 9,000 is okay for the R1 zone, but maybe we need to look at the zone boundaries again. And
Okay.
look at just drawing these differently.
Rezone.
Right. I mean, we're not, at this point, we're rezoning the whole city in some fashion or another. It's just maybe looking more at the consistency of the zoning that's being proposed with the actual land uses that we have. So,
Is the 6,000 your suggestion, or is it what this planning board changed when they
The-
rewrote?
the 6,000
I
in
wasn't
R2 is my suggestion.
Okay, okay.
And that gives you a 19% nonconformance.
Right. And I wouldn't say moving all of those R1 lots that have less than 9,000 into the R2. That probably isn't going to make sense based on where they're located.
Right.
But we certainly could hold or enlarge the R2 in some places to, again, have a more consistency in the zoning and put something down.
I'd rather see more contiguous maps than, that would bother me more to have everything all dotted all over the place than
Yeah.
having a 37% nonconformance. That doesn't bother me
Yeah.
as much as a scattered map.
R2.
You gotta be careful when you start changing stuff from R2 to R1 and vice versa. You gotta go back and look at what that does to the use table.
Yeah, I think the whole thing's connected.
Yeah, because bed and breakfast,
Single family.
R2's a yes, R1's a planning board. For some reason. Yet R1 has the larger lot size.
Well, with R1 being 9,000 feet and R2 being 6, it's, R1 is what you might consider your premier neighborhoods. Larger lots, no multi-unit, whereas R2 is
More densely clustered,
exactly.
mother-in-law apartments type of things.
But I think that it's a development advantage to have the smaller, in the that 6,000 in the R2, you'll be able to create more base lots for tax purposes.
Right.
R1, R2, in almost all cases, they track on land use. Just a few isolated instances.
It's more of the multifamily element of the R2 that's different.
I've got to head out of here.
Yeah.
Not that I want to break up the meeting, but I don't think we're going to be voting or anything.
No.
What I can do is, if if you're okay, I'll go back and look at the zone boundaries that were proposed and shift those a little bit to try to address some of that non-conforming element. And bring back another recommendation for you on that.
Sure, I'd like to see how we can gerrymander it.
This is good. So you have a GIS specialist work this for you, or are you doing it yourself?
Between Ken and I, we can work.
That's cool.
Good job, thank you.
Very nice.
Appreciate all the effort.
Oh, yes.
So let me,
Really do.
this document that I handed out to Kevin and to Daniel, this has some of the site plan stuff we've talked about tonight in it. So
Okay.
I can send out electronically if you want, but
If you've got it here, I'll take it. You've got one already?
this is different
That's
than
the
This
the
is new, okay.
How is
Okay.
it different
There's,
again?
Oh, you
That's
got
the
it.
one you got
That's-
tonight,
You
Dan.
got it already.
oh, okay,
I've got it already?
okay, so I have the old.
Bob and I
this-
need one.
I need,
The old one only goes through 13,200. This one starts to go through 13,300.
Oh, okay.
This is a new.
So there's additional.
Okay.
newer.
13.3.
Update.
Newer is better.
So this is new.
Okay.
I appreciate a lot of the organizational changes you're making as well, because going through it for the first time, it was really kind of difficult.
Yeah.
So it'll be nice to have that cleaned up.
Make a motion, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, second, Evan.
All in favor?
And we are-